Chapter 2521. Hal jumped on top of the pile of trash and started digging as if it found the target. His owner said, "Dogs have a very strong sense of smell. I'm guessing it's buried down there." Hal barked a few times, and two villagers started helping with digging. Soon, they found a new bag under the trash. The villager picked it up. "Is it this one?" Colton walked forward, took it, and chuckled. "It is." He opened it, and other than money, the ID and passport were still inside. There was also the key to a safe in the bank that was squashed behind the passport. That was what Freya had inherited from her grandfather after his passing. Freya had asked Colton to keep it, so he always brought it around with him. He wouldn't be able to explain to her if he lost it. He was glad he found it. Colton suddenly felt dizzy and fell to the floor. "Colton, Mr." When he woke up, it was already evening. Freya, who was sitting next to the bed, saw that he was awake, so she got up and looked at him. "You're up?" he asked. "How long was I out for?" "It's 5:30 p.m., and this is a nursing home. The nun let us stay and rest." Freya sat down on the bed and couldn't help but smile. Mr. Goldman went through the trash for half a day and ended up fainting. "It's going to be big news." He squinted. "You're laughing at me." Colton slowly sat up and leaned against the headboard. "Do you think I care about my passport or ID? Even though getting them back overseas is a hassle, it would just take 15 days. Then why did you go?" "I was afraid that you might blame me if I lost one thing." Freya was surprised when she saw him take out the golden key. How could she not know what key it was? It was the key to the safe box of the royal bank. The key symbolized the family. It was a royal gift. Without the key, everything left to her would just be there to fill up the safe. Freya didn't know how to feel. Are you stupid? No, you gave it to me because you trust me. If I lost it, I wouldn't be able to forgive myself. This was a gift from your grandfather. He placed the key in her hand. I can't let you down. Freya looked at the key in her hand and pressed her lips together. After a moment, she said, I wouldn't blame you even if you did lose it. $150 million worth of gold, $150 million worth of cash, 2 cases of antique jewelry. Do you know how much that all costs? Even if it was just the cash, that would be a lot of money, my little rich wife. Are you really alright about losing it? That's your gold mine. Since when do you talk so much? Freya raised her brows and chuckled. If you lose the key, I still have you, my gold mine. You can pay for my expenses. Colton squinted. Didn't you say that you don't need me to pay for you? Freya choked. It's because you don't want people to look down on you, right? Colton knew her too well. He was able to guess what was on her mind too. You don't feel comfortable about spending my money because you think it's not yours. You like to make what is yours and mine very clear. Not only are you afraid that people will look down on you, but you're also afraid that I will do the same. Chapter 2522. Freya looked away and didn't speak. But after we're married, our money will be shared. It's normal for you to spend my money, and it's normal that I make money for my wife to spend. There's no need to worry that I will look down on you. Why should I marry if I can't even let my wife spend some money? My wife put her life in danger to give me a child, have to sleep with me, and spend the rest of her life with me. If I don't want her to spend my money, I might as well stay single. Freya laughed because he made total sense, but that made her even sadder. Alright, let's not talk about this. I smell terrible and need a shower. Colton was disgusted by himself. No, I can't take this. She paused, then slowly got up. There's a shower room here. I'll bring you there. Freya brought him to the shower room, and before she went in, he hugged her from behind and chuckled. You smell terrible too. Let's go in together. Freya's face turned red as she whispered, Are you crazy? This is a nursing home. I know. Colton buried his face in her neck. I promise I won't do anything. After Colton carried her out of the shower, Freya's face was red. She buried her face in his chest. She vowed never to believe him again. Leia and Normal bumped into them in the corridor and asked, Where did you go? Freya was so ashamed. Norman could smell the scent of body shampoo, then cleared his throat and patted Leia's shoulder. Stop asking. After that, he looked at Colton. The head nun said we can eat at their dining hall. Do you want to go? Colton looked down at the woman in his arms. Go. Freya got out and said, since she asked, let's go. She walked away. Colton smiled and followed after her. Norman clicked his tongue. Let's not ask what happens between the couple. Let's go eat. He went after them. Wait for me. Leia didn't know how to react to that but followed along. There weren't a lot of people in the dining hall. After a simple meal, everyone sat at the table. Norman, who was used to expensive food, lost his appetite. The food there was so simple. This place would be perfect if there was some steak, coffee, and salad. Freya sighed. You should be glad we have food. Do you think the nursing home is as lavish as your home? Norman sighed again and asked, do you think the old people here were abandoned by their families? Leia lowered her eyes. Maybe not. Some just couldn't manage to take care of their parents, so they sent them here. Most of the old people don't have a life partner or children, so they have to stay here. I feel sorry for them. Leia looked at them and slowly said, compared to the homeless, these old people have a roof over their heads and food. It would be even sadder if even the nursing homes abandoned them. Hey, look, isn't that the thief? They looked toward where Norman was looking and saw Mia pushing a boy in a wheelchair to the dining hall. The boy was about 10 with blonde hair and fair skin. His eyes were light blue and very pretty, but they were empty. Chapter 2523. Could that boy be her brother? Asked Leia. Freya looked at them and didn't reply. Mia wheeled the boy next to the table, helped him up, and sat down. She said something to him and went to get the food while he waited there. Freya could notice something was wrong with the boy's eyes. Is he blind? Norman got up and walked over. Leia whispered, hey, what are you doing? Norman sat across from the boy, who noticed it but thought his sister was back. What are we having tonight? Norman sat in front of him and waved his hands, but the boy didn't react. You really can't see. The boy was curious. You are. Hey, stay away from my brother. Mia saw Norman when she walked over and immediately looked upset. She slammed the cutlery on the table. If you want revenge, come to me. Freya and Colton quickly got up and walked over. Norman crossed his arms and wasn't afraid. I just wanted to say hi to your brother. What are you afraid of anyway? That I would tell him that you're a... Leia covered his mouth. The boy asked, is he your friend? No. Mia looked annoyed and was obviously spooked by what Norman said. I don't know them. Freya could tell that Mia didn't want her brother to know what she did, so she walked over to the boy and leaned down. Are you Mia's brother? Mia's alert went up. The boy nodded and asked, did my sister do something again? Mia bit her lip and was going to explain when Freya smiled and said, no, your sister was just worried that we'd harm you, so she was being defensive. She seems to be very protective of you. The boy smiled. She's a great person. Even though she makes mistakes, she does them for me, so if she did something wrong, I would be angry. Mia looked down and didn't speak. Freya gently touched his face. Don't worry, she promised you she wouldn't, so you have to trust her. The boy nodded. Yes, I believe her. Mia immediately felt ashamed, especially at that moment. Freya left the dining hall with Colton and the others, but Mia ran after them. Wait. Freya turned around, and the others stopped. Mia walked toward them and stood there awkwardly, then bowed. I'm sorry. The sudden apology shocked Freya, but Norman smiled. Oh, you know how to apologize. Mia clenched her jaw as her ears turned red, but she held back and didn't stand up straight. Freya looked toward Colton, who said, you decide. She nodded and then walked to Mia. We accept your apology. Mia looked up with a surprised expression. You stole our wallet to help your brother see again, right? You approached this the wrong way. You're physically fit, so you could work for it. Mia frowned. I know I can, but I've asked the doctors, and they said that a cornea replacement surgery would cost $30,000. She looked down, then continued. I have no education, so getting a well-paying job is impossible. Even though I could do odd jobs and work 4 jobs at the same time and spend as little as possible since the nursing home provides food and shelter, the hospital informed me that they've found a cornea that could work for him, so I need to get the money in a month, or I'll miss the chance. There's no way I could get it in time, so I had to steal. You don't need the money anyway. Chapter 2524. Freya looked at her. But stealing isn't a great way. Even though you only target people who don't need it because you think they won't be worked up with a small amount of money, not everyone who has money will be fine with that. You should be glad that you targeted someone who wouldn't mind, but you might not always be lucky. You might get thrown into the lockup for a few days. If someone finds out that you're a thief, you might be beaten up and humiliated in public. They might even sell you off. Have you thought how your brother would survive without you? Mia had nothing to say because she had never thought about that. When is his surgery? January 28th. Freya felt around her pocket, pulled out a pen, and wrote down the phone number of the villa on Mia's palm. Call me in 2 days, and I'll give you the address. Come see me then. Mia froze for a few seconds, then curiously looked at the number in her palm. Freya took a few steps, stopped, and turned around. It's best to come in the afternoon. If you miss this chance, you won't get another. Mia watched as they walked away. Her instinct told her that she couldn't miss this chance. All right, I won't be late. Leia walked close to Freya. Are you really going to help her? Freya's eyes darted around. I feel sorry for that boy. He's only 10 and should be in school, enjoying his childhood, but he's living in a nursing home instead. Norman rested his arm on Colton's shoulder. Brother, I think you should start a charity foundation with your wife. Colton looked at him. Is your arm comfortable? Norman moved his arm away. Petty. Charity foundation. Freya thought about it, and after a moment, she turned toward Norman. That's not a bad idea. Norman was surprised. Would you really consider doing it? He didn't really mean it. Just like Mia said, the nursing home doesn't charge anyone for food and lodging. Don't you think that's strange? All the nursing homes we know charge quite a big fee. No nursing home would make a loss by taking care of the people for free. Leia frowned. Maybe this is a welfare organization. I thought about it too, but if they were a welfare organization, the foundation would help improve the place. Besides, the facilities here are old, and most of the food is vegetarian. There are only a few care workers here, including the manager, but so many elderly to take care of. We know they can't receive any income from this. The manager took in the elderly without charge, which shows that this is all charity. Are there really people who really work without expecting anything in return? Freya's words made Norman and Leia think. If this were a welfare organization, there would be funding to help maintain the nursing home, unless this wasn't a welfare organization but a private nursing home. In the city, a private nursing home could cost an arm and a leg. Only the rich would be able to afford to stay there. There was no reason for the rich to send their elderly to this place in this town. The inhabitants here were most probably just old people who had no one. Chapter 2525. Freya looked at them and said, since the nursing home manager could get help from the villagers to help us search for a wallet, it means they respect her. Even Mia, who is stubborn, respects her. I think she must be very well respected. The villagers probably respect her because she takes in everyone who needs help. Norman nodded. That makes her a saint less. The night fell, and the town was quiet. Freya rested in front of the window and looked out at the dark forest. The moon was bright and hung over the hills, clear and peaceful. Colton walked over, hugged her from behind, and rested his chin on the top of her head. What's on your mind? She smiled. About setting up a foundation. He paused, then chuckled. As long as you're happy. I'll support you no matter what. She looked up at Colton. Really? That's the money your grandpa left you. I can't stop you from using it. Starting a foundation is a great thing. Some people kept their wealth all their life and never got to use it in a good way. My wife became rich overnight but is planning to use some of that to start a foundation. I should be happy about that. Freya turned to face him with a big smile. We're doing this for our daughter. I hope that she'll be safe and grow up happy. Colton touched her face and planted a kiss on her forehead. I hope so too. The next day, Freya went to see the manager in her office. The nun was surprised. Can I help you, Miss Pruitt? Freya sat in front of the desk. I heard Mia saying that you established this nursing home to take care of the elderly for free and even provide food and shelter. I'm curious, how did you survive for so long without funding? The nun was a little surprised and was silent. After a long pause, she finally said, Do you think that I'm stupid for doing this? Freya was stunned. No, a lot of people couldn't understand when I first did this. They all thought that I was stupid because who would do something without expecting anything in return? They didn't think I would survive and would bet behind my back that it wouldn't last for more than a few months. They never expected me to last longer than a few months and made it to a few years. The nun smiled sadly. Most of the people here have no children, some of their partners passed early, and some were abandoned by their children who moved to the city. There isn't a nursing home here, so they will have nowhere to go if we don't take them in. They might end up dying in some corner, and no one would even realize. Freya looked at her. The nun wasn't as generous as they thought. Maybe to some people, what she did was stupid and laughable. It was as though the nun was making pointless sacrifices for people she wasn't even related to. But to her, that wasn't meaningless. The villagers started admiring her for her perseverance and started to respect her decisions. To them, she was a kind soul who had unconditional love. Would you consider being part of my charity foundation? The nun was shocked. Foundation, Freya calmly said, the nursing home facilities seem old. I can be the foundation's founder and invest money into improving the facilities here so everyone can have a better environment. You don't have to take any money from them, and I won't take any fees from you to join us. See it as a donation from me. Chapter 2526. The nun's eyes turned red. She could barely suppress her emotions as she said, Miss Pruitt, are you serious? She had approached other organizations to ask for their investment. However, all of them had turned her down after learning that she did not charge any fees for the old people. The reason they gave was that even though they wanted to do charity, they were not going to do it for free. Ever since then, she had never approached any organization anymore. She did not know how to repay Freya for making such an offer. Freya nodded. Yes, it goes without saying that I've already thought it through before proposing the idea to you. Miss Pruitt, I don't know how to repay your kindness, the nun replied, her eyes filled with tears of emotion. Freya got up and handed a tissue paper to her. You don't have to repay me anything. You've been doing this for a long time, so I'll do what I can to help you. The four of them left the town after they had their lunch. After they went their separate ways with Leia and Norman in the city, they returned to their house. They hadn't returned all night, and Brandon had been waiting for them. When he saw them, he asked, Where have you two been? I was worried sick about you. Freya said, We ran into some trouble, so we had to stay in a town for a night. Aren't we back now? Brandon let out a sigh of relief and said, It's good that you guys are fine. I couldn't get through to you last night. I was going to call the cops if you didn't come back today. Maybe the reception in the town is bad. Don't worry, we're all adults. Besides, with Colton around, what can happen to us? After that, she glanced at Colton. Colton cleared his throat and nodded. Yeah, I can handle it as well if anything happens. With a smile on her face, Freya coiled her arms around Brandon's and walked to the couch. Dad, I'd like to discuss something with you. Brandon asked, What is it? Freya told her father about the nursing home in the town. She also told him about her intention to form a foundation, and her father froze for a moment after hearing what she said. After a long while of silence, he said in a serious manner, Faye, you don't have to discuss what you want to do with me. No matter what you want to do, I'll support you. Freya did not expect that her father would support her. She felt relieved and said, Thank you, Dad. Looking at them, Colton thought about his own daughter. Would he support her decision when she grew up like Brandon supported Freya? At the Blue Valley Manor, Daisy learned from Nalace that Freya was going to start up a foundation. Why does Freya suddenly want to start a charity foundation? She asked. Nalace was wearing a tie. When he saw how curious she was through the mirror, he chuckled. Your brother is helping her to get everything ready, so I guess it's real. Daisy stood up and walked up to him. Then we should help them too. Nales lowered his face to look at her and pinched her nose. You just stay at home and keep our babies and yourself safe. I'll take care of everything. She snorted lightly and turned her face away. What else can I do other than sleep and eat? Nales grabbed her into his arms and said, You're so silly. Why must you poke your nose into their affairs? Could it be that you don't believe in your brother? Daisy buried herself in his chest and said, But I want to do something as well. Do you know how bored I am staying in this villa every day? Nales chuckled and grabbed her shoulders. He looked at her and said, If you want to go shopping, you can ask Madame Ames to go with you. I'm sure you two will have a lot of common topics. There were 2 stewards in the house. The female steward was Madame Ames. He was the one who had hired her to keep Daisy company when he was away. Chapter 2527. All right, replied Daisy. Seeing how disappointed she was, Nales landed a kiss at the corner of her lips and said, Be a good girl. After I've settled all my affairs, I'll be free to keep you company. Daisy did not say anything. Nales went downstairs and summoned Madame Ames. If Daisy wants to go out later, you go with her. Madame Ames replied, Yes, sir. After Nales left the villa, Madame Ames went into the kitchen. The maids in the kitchen were preparing lunch for Daisy. When they saw her, they greeted her, Madame Ames. Madame Ames nodded and said, Is the lunch ready? I'll bring it upstairs now. The maid handed Daisy's lunch to Madame Ames and went away. Madame Ames glanced at the nutritious meal on the tray and brought it upstairs. She knocked on the door and waited for a while. After getting Daisy's approval, it was only then she pushed the door and entered the room. Daisy was sitting on a couch next to the window right now. A ray of light diffused through the window and landed on her. The scene was so pretty that it looked just like a painting. She felt that this rumored royal bride-to-be was truly a beauty, and it was only now she understood why Nales liked her so much. Now that she was pregnant, she believed that no one could affect her position as the royal bride-to-be anymore. She placed the lunch on the table and said, Ma'am, it's time to eat your lunch. Daisy did not have much appetite recently. She just took a few sips of soup and placed the bowl down. I want to go out and have a walk later. Why don't you come with me? Madame Ames lowered her head and replied, Sure, ma'am. There were 2 cars following behind the car that Daisy was sitting in. Nales had ordered the bodyguards to follow Daisy around whenever she went out. They stopped in front of Freya's college. After receiving her call, Freya came downstairs to meet her. Daisy. Daisy turned around and waved at Freya with a smile on her face. Freya walked up to her and grabbed her hand. Glancing at the bodyguards and Madame Ames standing not far away from them, she chuckled, It seems like Nales is really worried about you. You have no idea how bored I am. Ever since I got pregnant, he hasn't allowed me to do anything at all. I'm worried that I might get crazy one day, whispered Daisy. Freya chuckled. Well, that's because you're pregnant. The first few months of pregnancy are essential, and he's just worried about you. Both of them walked to the side, and Daisy asked, Oh yeah, I heard that you and my brother are setting up a charity foundation. Freya nodded. Yeah, why do you suddenly want to start this charity foundation? Maybe I just want to help those people. Besides, I have to do something useful with all the money my grandfather left me, right? Replied Freya. Daisy nodded. You're right. After all, you're rich now. By starting a charity foundation with the money your grandfather left you, you'll become a famous philanthropist in the future. Freya laughed. Well, I'm doing this for charm's sake as well. Daisy left after chatting with Freya for a long while. However, she did not return to the Blue Valley Manor. Instead, she called the driver to bring her to the Giannis group. Madame Ames was stunned, and her heart jumped into her throat. Ma'am, we've been out for a very long time. We should go back now. Daisy smiled. Don't worry. I don't have anything to do either if I go back. I just want to go visit my husband. But, just rest assured, Madame Ames. I'm the one who brought you there. He won't get angry at you. Madame Ames did not say anything anymore. Soon, they arrived at the Giannis group. Daisy asked them to wait for her in the car and entered the building. Madam Ames hurriedly pulled her phone out and sent a message to someone. "Miss, she's here." Chapter 2528. In the administrative office, a flashy-looking woman received the text message and hurriedly deleted it. Nobody would have expected that Madam Ames was a mole she placed around Daisy. The royal bride-to-be in the rumor. Well, I can't wait to meet her anymore. As soon as Daisy came out of the elevator, a woman came up and stopped her. "You're the royal bride-to-be, right?" Daisy lifted her head and squinted. She had never seen the woman in front of her before. "Do I know you?" The woman stretched her hand toward her and said, "I'm Cecilia Taylor, His Highness' assistant. My grandfather is an earl, and my father is a minister in the cabinet." Just when Daisy wanted to hold her hand, Cecilia retracted her hand and smiled. "I'm sorry for telling you so much. But His Highness is still in a meeting. He's very busy, so I'm afraid he won't have time to entertain you." Daisy's hand froze midair, but she soon returned to her senses and retracted her hand. With an indifferent face, she said, "Then I'll wait for him to finish his meeting." Cecilia looked at her and raised her brows. "I didn't know that you're so clingy, madam." "What?" Daisy frowned. "Do you know that His Highness has been very busy lately? As his wife, you shouldn't act so unreasonably." Cecilia crossed her arms in front of her chest and looked down at Daisy with a condescending gaze since she was taller. "As his wife, you should help him to solve his problems. If you can't do anything, then you should just stand back instead of giving him more problems." Her words were sharp and pierced into Daisy's heart like blades. She clenched her fists tightly. Honestly, she felt Cecilia was right. It was true that she knew nothing about Nales's company. Did this mean that Nales thought she was acting unreasonably too? She turned around and left. Cecilia let out a cold smirk. This is just the beginning, and she already can't stand it anymore. There'll be more in the future, and I wonder how she is going to take it. Suddenly, Daisy stopped in front of the elevator and turned around to look at Cecilia. "Oh yeah, I'd like to tell you about something." Cecilia looked at Daisy emotionlessly, and the latter said calmly, "It isn't that I can't do anything. It's just that he doesn't allow me to do anything. Since he doesn't need my help, as his wife, I can only trust him that he'll do better. So if you think you can sow discord between us, you'd better drop the thought, madam." After she finished speaking, she harumphed and walked into the elevator. Cecilia's expression changed, and her entire body was shaking from anger. What did she just call me? Did she just call me madam? Damn it, who does she think she is? She's just a Goldman and an actress from Zelakavia. Does she really think she has what it takes to become his wife? You can behave like this because you're pregnant. Let's see if you can marry into the royal family once you lose your kid. Daisy went back into the car, and her face was dark. She told the driver to bring them back home, and Madame Ames seemed to have realized something. She did not dare to ask Daisy, but she assumed that she must have run into Cecilia. Cecilia came from an aristocratic family. Her family, the Taylors, had been serving the royal family since a long time ago. Although they were not as wealthy as the Hathaway, they had more connections in the cabinet than the Hathaway. The Taylors had a lot of influence in the cabinet. Now that the Queen had just succeeded to the throne, the cabinet was not happy with an outsider becoming the princess, so they all pinned their hopes on Cecilia. This was what those nobles and ministers thought as well. Meanwhile, Nales came out of the meeting room after he was done with his meeting. Hedian hastily walked up to him and whispered, "Nali, your wife came just now," and Cecilia stopped her. Nolachi's gaze turned cold. What did she say to her? Hedian shook his head. I couldn't hear what they were talking about. You asked me to keep an eye on her, but I couldn't let her find out that I'm watching her. All I saw was that your wife's face was dark, and I'm sure that Cecilia had told her something. Chapter 2529. Nales massaged his nose and fell silent. When he visited the palace the other day, his father came to him and told him about the cabinet meeting. Then, Cecilia came to the company and became his assistant. He knew that this was all done by the Taylors. The Taylors told everyone that they were loyal to the family by mentioning their many contributions to the royal family. However, in fact, they just wanted to control the royal family. When his grandfather was alive, the Taylors had done something behind everyone's back because they were dissatisfied with Yorick being made Minister of Finance. At that time, his grandfather kicked a minister close to the Taylors out of the cabinet to tell them to behave themselves. Therefore, the Taylors had been keeping a very low profile since then. Now that his grandfather had passed away and his mother had succeeded the throne, they started to become active again. Not only did they get Cecilia to his side, but they even started to gather up a group of people and tried to stop Daisy from becoming the princess. When he was not the prince, these people were not like this at all. Gideon felt a chill down his spine when he looked at Nalace's face. "Nali, are you sure you don't want to do anything about her? She's so cocky." Nalace squinted and said, "Do you think it's that easy to uproot an aristocratic family? Besides, the Taylors are special. When my grandfather was still alive, he couldn't get any evidence on the Taylors. And this means that Elder Master Taylor isn't someone we can easily deal with." Gideon scratched his cheek and mumbled, "I can never understand the fight between the nobles." Nalace patted his shoulder and said, "All right. Just keep an eye on her. I'll handle it." When Nalace was leaving the company in the evening, Cecilia came down from a Lamborghini and took off her sunglasses. "Your Highness." He stopped in his tracks and looked at Cecilia coldly. "Yes." Cecilia stopped in front of him and smiled at him confidently. "Do you have time now, Your Highness? I wonder if I could have dinner with you." Nalace smiled at her and said, "I'm sorry, but I don't have time." When he was about to leave, Cecilia continued, "My father hopes that we can have dinner together. Your Highness, it's okay if you reject me, but can you reject my father?" Nalace's face sank. At the Blue Valley Manor, Daisy came downstairs and walked toward the table. She sat down, and just when she picked up the fork, Madam Ames came forward and said, "Ma'am, Mr. Knowles said he'll be eating outside and told us to inform you that you don't have to wait for him." Daisy picked up a cherry. She did not know why, but she felt a little bit annoyed when the things that Cecilia said this afternoon surfaced in her mind. "You don't have to purposely tell me about it. I know he's busy entertaining his guests." Madam Ames was stunned for a moment and lowered his head. "Mr. Knowles is indeed entertaining his guests. You should try to understand him. Do all of you think that I'm an unreasonable person as well?" All of the maids were stunned, and Madam Ames smiled awkwardly. "Of course, we don't think like that. If you don't think like that, then you don't need to tell me anything. Can I force him to come back for dinner if he doesn't want to come back? I can eat dinner by myself as well." Daisy took a few bites and felt nauseous. She got up, rushed to the bathroom, and vomited all of the food she had eaten. Madam Ames's voice came from outside the door. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Daisy flushed the toilet and opened the door. "I'm fine. I don't have any appetite, so I'm going upstairs." At the restaurant, Cecilia gently swirled her glass of wine and lifted her eyes to look at the handsome man sitting across her. She had heard of him when he was the young heir of the Knowles. Chapter 2530. It was just that Cecilia was more interested in benefits than looks. However, now that Nalace's mother had succeeded as the queen, it made him the prince, and his son would be the future king. Of course, it could only be his and her son. Cecilia took a sip from the wine and said, "Your Highness, don't you think it's a bit disrespectful to be distracted when you're having dinner with me?" Nalace tapped his finger on the table and said, "Miss Taylor, I hope you understand one thing. I came here to have dinner with you because you asked me to. I'm just fulfilling your request, and it doesn't mean that I intend to have this meal with you." The smile on Cecilia's face froze. However, she was taught to maintain her manners in a situation like this, so she kept smiling and said, "Is it because you're worried about your wife?" Nalace did not say anything. Cecilia crossed her fingers under her chin and smirked. "Your wife is indeed beautiful. She's the typical beauty from Zelakavia, but unfortunately, beauty won't bring you anything you want. With your current status, you can always choose a beautiful and capable woman as your wife to assist you." After she finished speaking, she placed her hand on top of his. Her nails were varnished a brilliant shade of red as she caressed his skin. "In my opinion, I'm more suitable to be your wife than that delicate woman." A hint of coldness crossed Nalace's eyes. He looked at Cecilia calmly and asked, "Really?" Cecilia smiled vibrantly and said, "What she can give you, I can give you more. Besides, the Goldmans don't have any say in the royal family's affairs. As for me, I'll not only be your wife, but I'll also be your partner in business and politics." Nalace withdrew his hand and picked up a napkin to wipe where she had touched it. "Do you know me? I'm sure I can if you give me some time." He placed the napkin on the table and said, "I don't like being controlled by a woman." She was stunned for a moment but soon came to her senses and smiled. "I won't do that to you." With a smile, Nalace replied, "And I don't like a woman who thinks she's smart. For example, you." Cecilia's face sank. "What do you mean by this, Your Highness?" Nalace leaned against the back of the chair and said, "Do you really think you can get me to do whatever you want me to do by bringing up your father? It seems to me that you've underestimated me. Even your father doesn't dare to say something like that in front of me. And what you're saying seems to indicate to me that the Taylors have more power than the royal family and that you can twist me around your fingers." Cecilia's expression changed. She gripped the glass tightly and forced a smile on her face. "That's not what I mean. My father is loyal to the royal family and does everything out of his concern for the royal family. If your father really cares about the royal family that much, then he should mind his own business and not interfere with the royal family or my family affairs." Nalace picked up the glass and finished the wine in one gulp. He placed the glass on the table and rose to his feet. "If you really think that your family has so much power, then I'm really wondering if the Taylors are really loyal to the royal family or if you guys have some kind of agenda." After he finished speaking, he picked up his jacket and left. Cecilia gnashed her teeth. She was so angry that she nearly crushed the glass in her hand. She would never forget the things that happened today. After she kicked that woman away and became the princess, she would let him know the consequences of looking down on her. It was already 9 p.m. when Nalace returned to the manor. Madame Ames was kind of surprised to see him back so soon. "Did Miss Taylor fail to keep him?" Nolachi took off his jacket and placed it on his arms. While he was taking off his tie, he asked, "Where is Daisy?"